So it's so great to have you here on the topic of mindfulness and your journey in creating home studio.
Absolutely. I'm super excited to talk about this.
Yeah, I am as well. And without further ado, perhaps you could share the journey of how you arrived in this space. And one thing we both have in common is something called UX. Maybe explain that to the novice who are unaware of what this concept means.
Absolutely. So let me see where to start off from. Now, I've been designing for the web for a very long time. And before I jump into that, how did I land into creating home studios for entrepreneurs, for podcast hosts, and other virtual speakers? Well, it all started with me trying to solve a problem for myself. In 2018, I wrote an ebook on how to use your smartphone for video production. And I wanted to create a course around it. Well, when I started to set up the cameras in my home basement, all I saw was yellow walls. Now, it would be really weird to say, well, why don't you start with a studio? Well, the funny thing is, I come from a video studio background or a Hollywood studio background where I've shot multiple documentaries, short films, and what do you call that? Commercials. Yeah, so documentaries, short films, and commercials for many, many different people. So I know what it takes to stage, but unfortunately, I did not have that kind of space for myself. I was like, you know what? No problem. Let me still go and try and record something so I could teach people. So I created some content using my smartphone, using DSLRs. The one thing that I was still struggling on was as soon as I hit the record button, I didn't know what to say. So there's multiple things going on. I spent a ton of time behind the camera, not enough time in front of the camera. So I had to work on being more present in front of the camera, as well as having a story to tell, having a way to start and jump into a any conversation without hesitation, as if I've been doing it for a while. So that took me a lot of practice. Now, to go back to user experience or UX, and back in the days, you would hear about UI and or graphic design and user experience. And user experience is actually a methodology where we are the advocate for the user of an application, may it be a software application on the computer, a mobile app on your smartphone, or a web app that is living inside a web browser. All of those things require a lot of research, a lot of thought, because at any given moment, you might jump out of that application and go play with something else. And all of this actually is not that old, probably around 16 years ago when Apple came out with the first iPhone and they came out with the human design guideline, which was really human design guideline for developing apps on the iPhone. And that just intrigued me in ways that I could not have imagined. And I took some courses and have been doing or creating user experiences for enterprise applications since then. It's a very niche, extremely niche space where you're creating and you're essentially it's very similar to being an entrepreneur because as an entrepreneur, we have to figure out who our target audience is, who can we provide service to. And just like that, as the user experience designer, you know exactly the people that you're designing these applications for. So we do a ton of interviews, we do a ton of um, talking to other people and the scenarios that they're going to be in. So that's a little bit of my story on how I got into creating home studios for others and where I come from user experience standpoint.
And what's interesting is you're talking about it from the perspective of the person who's living it, meaning that you were talking about, suddenly I'm having to figure out how am I going to speak in this context. So it's one thing to have a place where you're filming a context or situation, right? But
Mm-hmm.
then when you are that person that's being filmed and being mindful of how you are presenting yourself, that
Yeah,
adds a whole new element that I know for myself that I'm experiencing it. But that's like multiple things that you're now playing a role in orchestrating it in your new business as an entrepreneur. And can you
absolutely.
speak to how like mindfulness plays in all of this, not only for yourself, but as when you coach your clients?
That's such a great question because mindfulness is something that we are not very mindful of, unfortunately, because we're constantly running, constantly consuming content at an alarming fast space. I mean, our short-term memory is so small, and it almost reminds me of what Ted Lasso tells his team: be a goldfish. A goldfish has a very short-term memory. And what's amazing is that we are unfortunately in a space where short form content, 7 seconds, 6 seconds, is like blowing up. But what's really sad is people who are creating that content, it's almost like they're creating it to spark an idea in your mind, and then you can go deeper into that journey on why they even shared it. For example, every time I go on TikTok, I am looking at content that's uh, curated for me because I'm a user experience designer. I love software, I love technology. So I'm seeing things in that space. For example, I was sharing earlier with you Photoshop beta, the little software, and somebody was created a short video on there talking about how this works. Now, I was being very mindful when I'm watching this video. And so what you want to do, engage your mind and see what is this video doing for you? Is it enhancing your mindset? Are you learning something from it? And what are you going to do with it? So as soon as I watched this video, I was like, okay, I know Adobe Photoshop. I know that a beta version of it is now available. I immediately went to Adobe's website, found the link, downloaded it, and start playing with it. So small things like that, they're going to trigger a reaction in you. Now, depending on who you are, if you're a mindful entrepreneur, you might be looking for something very specific. And if you dig deep enough in that space, your mind is going to start bringing that answers in front of you. And to be mindful in that space, you really have to take time away from consuming a ton of content. And that's where meditation or sleeping on time and just going out for walks is huge for our minds.
And I couldn't agree more, because just having that ability to pause and reflect on why am I consuming what I'm about to consume, and recognizing that as your opportunity to then take that, turn that around, and you're probably going to use that information to help your clients.
Mm-hmm.
Now, a lot of what I have gathered from your journey is that there was the user experience element, there was the filmography, so to speak,
Mm-hmm.
and then you combine these, what I call this passion,
Yes.
and you create it into a new purpose. Maybe you could speak to where you've landed with this new purpose.
You know, throughout our lives, we go through many chapters and many mentors and many different things. And the more we pay attention to on what our mind is searching for and what we are absorbing from the society, the more in tune with yourself you're going to be. So what do I mean by that? And what happened is I'm constantly paying attention to what's happening around me, people around me. And back in 2012, we discovered that my son, who was 2 years old at that time, had allergies. He had allergies to several different food items and the environment and whatnot. And we took him to the doctor, and doctor said, hey, you might want to look into local honey. I'm like, what do you mean local honey? Like, well, local honey is produced by bees in your area where you're living. I'm like, okay, that's really interesting. So a normal person would probably just go to the farmer's market and buy some local honey, but not me. I mean, we probably went and bought some local honey. I started thinking about honey from a totally different perspective. Now, I have a very multifaceted personality where I'm constantly learning and about different things. And being an avid Kickstarter backer, I discovered a Kickstarter campaign around beehives. It made it really simple for you to extract honey from the hive without bothering the bees that much. Around the same time, my friend who had just started a farm, a 10-acre farm, said, "Hey, Junaid, can I borrow your GoPro? Because I want to film bees." Like, what do you mean film bees? I'm like, well, I'm going to be renting about 10 different hives for my farm to pollinate. I'm like, oh, really? You can rent bees? What do you mean? So he shared the footage with me after he recorded using my GoPro. I was like really fascinated. So now that's 3 points all around the beekeeping, right? Honeybees, the cure that they do. And as it's going forward in time, so from 2012 to 2018 is when I finally stepped into becoming a beekeeper myself, because I kept on stacking these uh, mentalities or stacking these different ideas on top of each other, and it built on each other for me to be able to get into it. So just like that, it doesn't have to be that long. Sometimes it's even a shorter period of time. You just have to pay attention to the signals, to the markers around you and the people that are talking about this, to be able to get, actually launch or make something happen.
Also, it sounds like while the catalyst behind the bee documentation, I'm going to use that term for now, using
Yes.
video, the catalyst was your son, but then at some point that became the passion, and the passion was then became the purpose. It was almost like a cyclical thing with you
Yes.
because you were feeding off of something that you were already interested in.
Yeah. No, it was a really beautiful journey, because as I started documenting my beekeeping journey, I was like, okay, how am I going to document it? Well, let's podcast, because that was something on my mind again. From 2010, I had a podcast. So that was also something in the back of my mind. I want to start a podcast. So 2018, I was like, okay, perfect. Gary Vee's saying you got to document your journey. I have a journey that I'm on right now, taking this beekeeping class, getting into beekeeping. I can document it. I mean, I could have documented as a blog, but I was like, audio is so much easier because I'm commuting back and forth from work. I can spend an hour and a half every day in documenting this journey. So as I documented my beekeeping journey, I also stepped into podcasting and started pivoting that podcast from documenting a beekeeping journey into interviewing other guests. Now, initially, I was just interviewing guests on the video form, on audio, but then as COVID hit and we all came home, and my passion for creating this content to teach people video production using their smartphones, all of those things kind of like came together, in where I'm not only setting up a space for myself, but I'm also setting up uh, support system for others, so that I can teach them, I can answer their questions, having this 10 plus years of knowledge into video production and how cameras work and how lighting work, like putting all of that together. It's just been beautiful, as it all like catalytic, like one thing led to another, and then you just have to keep on being curious and keep on pulling that thread. Okay, what's next, and just growing your mindset, growing your talents.
And I hear this in your story that, like you were saying, there's layers. And if one thing had not occurred, perhaps the journey or the path would have been a different story.
Yeah.
But just everything at the moment may seem like either a burden or a boon, and if it depends on your mindset.
You're 100%, you're 100% right. And I was, I'd like to say I was fortunate enough to have a mindset of a growth mindset, let's say. And that's because I've been listening to or following Tony Robbins since 2003, right? So having that positive mindset that anything is possible. Plus, I think for if even if I go further back, my mom was a huge proponent in giving me this mindset because she was like, "Oh, you want to do this? Let's make it happen." Like she was always going into things and making things happen, and that enabled me to say, "Oh, if this is a problem, we could definitely solve it," and solve it we did.
Now, for those who are listening to this podcast, I highly encourage you to watch the YouTube version of it because whenever I talk to Junaid, I'm like, okay, Junaid, you're cool, but it's your background that's just so fascinating. It's just intriguing and it's cool. And just imagine now in the era of COVID, when people had to watch others with their makeshift backgrounds, and now here comes the Junaid. You'll revolutionize how people can present themselves.
Yes, it's definitely been something of a passion of mine to help others level up their video because what it's doing for not just me, for what it's doing for me is that I'm going to pay more attention to your content. What's doing for you is that you feel more confidence and you feel more authentic in creating your content. Plus, there was a study done where the quality of the audio that people hear also shows them your level of intellect, meaning they did a research with a few students and few people, and they play the same audio, same lecturer at different audio quality. And 19% people said this person is much more smarter and sounded more appealing because the audio quality was much higher for that one.
So your purpose became to not only help people navigate towards creating a better home studio, but also educating them because it's not just about the right lighting. It's not just about the right sound.
Mhm.
It's like anything in life, it's the full user experience,
Yes, absolutely. It is a full
right?
user experience.
So now digging a little bit deeper into the purpose behind this and how mindfulness plays. Now that you've embarked on this, I know the backstory that you've pivoted and transitioned more deeply into this new passion. Maybe share the journey for those who are curious, like, should I make that leap? And how did you do it?
That's a great question. And I made this leap back in 2018, saying, "Hey, I've been doing documentaries. I can do a lot more of these." What I didn't realize is that I didn't have the system in place to be able to do that, and I had to go find another job after that. But then, as I delved into my own podcasting journey and building the studios and really getting deep into the connections that was able to make, I realized that it's a two-prong situation. You need to have the people who need your solution, but you also have to have a transformation yourself. So once you have a transformation yourself, you can then say, "Hey, I've done this. I can do this for you as well." So after having after having interviewed over 450 people on my own podcast, it gave me the storytelling power. It gave me the ammunition to say, "Hey, I can sustain where I am because I'm able to help these people with the solutions that I bring."
And you went through the hero's journey. You went through, you understood the pain, you had the wounds to prove it, and then you
Yes.
come out on the other side. And it's not an end result. It's a I as I can attest, and you could probably attest, is it's a journey. So you are continually on this path now.
Yes. And the one thing that I tell every single person is don't wait to get the best equipment. Don't wait to get the best you because think about it. When you start learning to drive a car, do you say, "No, I'm going to buy the best car and then I'm going to start learning to drive a car"? No, you don't. You probably get a used car, you probably get a hand me down from your dad or from your parents that you learn to drive a car. Entrepreneurship is the same way. Just get started because you are going to learn along the way what's right for you and what's not right for you. Gary Vaynerchuk always says before you step into a entrepreneurship, go work for somebody in that same space because they're going to show you all the things that you might not even thought about, and then you can apply it in your own business. If you take an example of college and school, you are also a lot among other people that are going through the same journey. So make sure that you have a group of people around you that are supporting you, that have your best interests in mind, and you'll see that you will be successful and you'll have a ton of people uh, guiding you along the way.
And that mentorship, that living through someone else's experience vicariously, is something that I often feel that I missed out on. And it wasn't until I was seasoned in the life of being in corporate world and realizing that I proactively would have sought out mentorship in the era of now Zoom and
Mhm.
online evergreen courses and just being accessible to one another. I
Yeah.
feel like we're the new level of enablers of mentorship.
No, you're 100% right. And the beautiful thing is the more active you are as an entrepreneur or as somebody who's learning something, the more chances you have of finding people that would want to mentor you because they see the potential. But if you go say, "Oh, I want to do this, and can somebody be my mentor?" Well, guess what? You're gonna have a tough time in finding a mentor because you haven't proven your own dedication.
Yeah, absolutely. I have that alone, that topic alone could be a podcast for you and I, because I
Yeah.
have a lot to say about that topic. Now, for those who are further curious on taking their personal passion, turning it into a purpose, and recognizing this the tools and techniques that they need, like you were mentioning, the different ways and the mindset one can have,
Hmm.
or seeking out a mentorship. What other thing has led you to now where you are at? What is the name of your now current entrepreneurship passion, and how can people learn more about that?
So I'm running something called Home Studio Mastery, and I call myself the Home Studio Architect because I architect your home studio based on your needs, based on your space, and that's something that I've been doing for the past couple of years. And just because just because you can create video on your phone doesn't mean that it's always going to be the best. Keep at it. Keep going, keep making mistakes because those mistakes is where you're going to learn. Now, unfortunately, in the schooling system, they tell you not to make mistakes, which is a huge no, but you want to make mistakes because that is the only way we learn.
Absolutely. I've learned from people that I admire that some of their best mentors told them to embrace the mistakes. They're not mistakes.
100%.
Okay. So your home studio is your current passion. Well, one of the things I know about you is you recently attended a social media event here in San Diego, and there you met with others who are really excited about your technology and who are also perhaps vicariously mentors or being mentored by you just by listening to your podcast. Can you share a little bit more about that space in terms of social media meets your technology, and how do they interconnect?
Absolutely. So with the home studios, you're technically creating a space for yourself so you can create content effortlessly. And what we've done is once people are comfortable in their own studios and they're like, hey, when I'm traveling, I want to create same type of content. So I partnered with a gentleman named Ken Okazaki of GoBox Studio, where we created a portable studio in a box, which enables you to create high quality content on the go. The beautiful part and the simpler thing that we did is we created a full-on production switcher into this unit, which can basically edit video on the go for you. Because what does he mean by editing video? Well, when you're creating a piece of content, you then take that piece of content, you apply edits, you apply things on top of your image. Well, this one lets you do that on the go, so so that you're saving yourself so much more time by doing it on the run as opposed to doing it in post-production. So that's something that's a product that we launched back in September called GoBox Studio, and you can learn more about it over at goboxstudio.com.
That's wonderful. Now, before we wrap up on the concept of passion and purpose as it relates to mindfulness, any words of wisdom specific to those who want to be encouraged or feel like they can maintain a drive to go towards their passion?
All right, that is a tough one, Shilpa, especially in this short time. But what I would love to say is develop some habits that are going to help you achieve that success. There's a book by Brendan Burchard, The High Performance Habits, or The 6 Habits of Growth, which is a Audible special. He talks about specific habits that are going to enable you to level up every single day. All you want to do is work, just be 1% better from the day before, and by the within 367 days, guess how much percentage you are better? You're now 367% better than last year. So just work on 1% being better every single day, and develop some habits that are going to lead you into success. And there's a ton of examples all over the world. There's tons of books, there's tons of podcasts that can help you achieve that mindfulness. And over right here on Omni Mindfulness Podcast, there's a ton of content that Shilpa's created that can also help you be mindful and build a better tomorrow.
One thing that you said over and over that you may not be even aware of, but I think that the audience that's listening to this portion on the mindfulness needs to be cognizant of, is that you were mindful of the lessons you were learning along the way, and mindful of your attitude about it, because each one became the stepping stone for where you are now. I
100%.
think that is gold.
Thank you so much, Shilpa.
Thank you.